My name is Im. I was sitting at the end of the table when my mother said it. She said, at least your brother knows how to make money, and like some people, she looked right at me when she said it. Me brother laughed, had said, don't worry sis, we can't all be successful. Then he ordered another bottle of wine, nath expensive. Oh, I didn't say anything, he just smiled and kept eating. This dinner was supposed to be a celebration. Me brother had just closed some big deal at work. Me parents insisted we all go out. They picked a restaurant, the most expensive one in the city, kind of place where they don't list prices on the menu, kind of place where ordering water feels wrong. Me brother brought his wife. She was wearing a dress that cost more than my rent at least that's what my mother said. She said, isn't she gorgeous? That dress is $4,000. He said, it's nice. Me mother said, you should dress like that so much time. I said, I'm fine with what I have. Ash said, that's the problem, you're always fine with less. Me brother worked in real estate development. He made good money, drove a BMW, lived in a penthouse downtown. He posted about his life, constant luxury vacations, designer clothes, expensive restaurants. Me parents loved it. He shared everything. They said, look at what he's accomplished. He worked as a software engineer. He lived in a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood. He drove a used Honda. I didn't post on social media. I didn't talk about my salary. Didn't wear expensive clothes to my family. I was invisibly boring one who never did anything interesting growing up. It was always like this. Me brother was 3 years older. He was popular, athletic, and loved him. He was quiet. He liked computers. He spent weekends coding. Me father used to say, why can't you be more like your brother? Me mother would say, she's just different, better, just different. When my brother graduated college, my parents threw him a huge party. He invited everyone. He rented a house. He made speeches about how proud they were. When I graduated 2 years later, we went to dinner, just the four of us, at a chain restaurant. Me mother said, we already did the big party thing, don't need to do it again. Me brother's wedding cost $60,000. Me parents paid for half. He said, it's what parents do. He said he deserves the best. He wasn't married. He wasn't even dating. Me mother said, that's because you don't put yourself out there. Said, I'm focused on work. She said, that's your problem. Work isn't everything, but work was everything to my was good at it, really good. He started as a junior developer making $55,000 a year. He lived cheap. He saved everything. He invested carefully. Taught myself about stocks and crypto and real estate. I read everything I could find. He spent my evenings learning instead of going out. After 3 years, I switched jobs. Me salary jumped to $90,000, then $120,000, then $160,000. Kept living in the same apartment, kept driving the same car, kept wearing the same clothes. Nobody in my family asked about my career. They just assumed I was doing okay, not great, just okay. 5 years ago, I started freelancing on the side, building apps for small companies. Consulin made an extra $40,000 the first year, 60 the second year, 80 the third year. I didn't tell any, and I just kept working. Then 3 years ago, I built a messaging app that solved a specific problem for e-commerce companies. He spent 8 months on it, nights and weekends. He launched it quickly. Within 6 months, I had 200 clients. Within a year, I had 1,500. He sold subscriptions $10 a month per user. The month he didn't quit my job. He hired contractors to help maintain the app. He automated everything I could. The money kept coming in. He kept living the same way. Nobody knew, not my friends, not my coworkers, definitely not my family. At family dinners, my brother talked about his commission show. He just made $30,000 on one deal. Oh, he was on track for his best year ever. Me parents would ask me how work was. He'd say fine. He'd say just fine. He'd say yeah, it's steady. Then they'd go back to talking about my brother. Me mother would say, you should ask your brother for advice, he knows how to make money. I'd say, I'm doing okay. Say okay isn't in a way you should want. Marade say, I'm comfortable. Say comfortable is settling. Me brother would jump in, head say, I could get you an entry-level job at my company if you want. He'd say, no thanks. Say, suit yourself. The comments got worse over time. Me mother started calling me broke at family gatherings. She'd say it like a joke, but it never felt like one. She'd say, there's my successful son and my broke daughter. People would laugh. He'd smile. What else could I do? Me brother started paying for dinner. She'd make a big show of. I'd say, don't worry, I got this. And me parents would say, thank you honey, you were so generous. Look at me. Had say, maybe one day you'll be able to do this too. He'd say, maybe. Last month my mother called. She said, We're having a special dinner for your brother. He just closed a huge deal. He said, okay. She said, wear something nice treat to look presentably. Said, I will. She said, and don't talk about work. Nobody wants to hear about computers. He said, fine. That's how I ended up at this dinner, sitting at the end of the table wearing a simple black dress. About 5 years ago, watching my brother order appetizers. I didn't want listening to my mother brag about him to the waiter. Me brother ordered oysters. She ordered steak. Ordered lobster. His wife ordered the tasting menu. Me parents ordered expensive and Tracy ordered salmon. Me mother said that's it. I said I'm not that hungry. She said you never array, you never enjoy anything. She said I enjoy plenty. She said like what, sitting at home. I didn't answer with wine. Cammy. Me brother poured glasses for every knee. Skipped me. Me mother said she doesn't drink much anyway. Me brother said more for us. The la Katie sip my water. That's when my mother said it. She said at least your brother knows how to make money and like some people. Me brother added his comment. Me sister-in-law smiled into her wine glass. Me father said nothing. He never did. He could have said so. Me think he could have told them the truth right then, but I didn't. He just sat there. What Eddie knew what was coming. The bill. Me brother kept ordering another appetizer, another bottle of wine, dessert for the table after dinner. Drink. She was showing off. This is what I do. This is who I am. The successful one who can afford anything. She did the math in my head. The oysters were $60. The steaks were $120 each. Lobster was $90. Tasting menu was $200. The wine was $300 a bottle. The ordered 2 bottles. Desserts, drinks. It was adding up fast. Me brother didn't care. He was talking about his next deal. Oh, he was going to make even more money. How? He just bought a new watch, a Rolex, $15,000. Me mother said show her. He held out his wrist. She said, isn't it beautiful? He said it's nice. Me brother said nice, it's a Rolex. He said I know. Me mother said you could never afford something like that. He said probably not. She said that's Saudi, you should want nice things. He said I have what I need. Me brother said that's loser talk. He looked at him. He said what, successful people want more. He pushed for more. You just accept less. He said if you say so. Dinner went onto a horse. They talked about expensive things, vacations they were planning, cars they wanted to buy, houses in neighborhoods I'd never heard of. He sat quietly, answered questions when asked. Mostly I just listened. Finally the waiter brought the check, set it in the middle of the table. Me brother reached for it. Always died. Opened the leather full dairy, watched his face. His eyes went wide just for a second, then he recovered. He said, wow, they really got us tonight. Me mother said how much? Said a load. Looked at my father. Me father pulled out his wallet, said I can cover part. Me brother said no I got it, but he hesitated. Looked at the check again. Me mother said what's wrong? Said nothing, it's just more than I expected. He looked at his wife. She looked at her purse. Said I didn't bring my card. He said it's fini. Put his card down. Waiter took it. We waited. Me brother was doing math in his head. He could tell he was calculating, figuring out how much this was going to hurt. Waiter came back, said I'm sorry sir, your card was declined. At the table went silent. Me brother said what? Waiter said it was declined. Would you like to try another card? Me brother's face turned red. He said that's impossibly. Waiter said I ran it twice. Me brother pulled out another card. He handed it over. The waiter left. Sat in silence. Me mother said what's going on? Me brother said I don't know, it should work. Me father said how much is it? Me brother showed him the check. Me father went pale. He said $18,700. Me mother said what? Me brother said I now. He didn't think it would be that much. Waiter came back, said I'm sorry sir, this one was also declined. Me brother stood up. He said let me call my bank. Walked away from the table. His wife looked mortified. Me mother looked confused. Me father looked stressed. He reached into my purse, pulled out my wallet. He took out my credit card. He handed it to the waiter. He said try this one. Said are you sure? I said yes. Took it. Me mother said what are you doing? She said paying. She said with what? He said my card. She said you can't afford these. He said we'll see part 0 to line break format, no symbols. The waiter walked away with my card. Me mother stared at Mesh, said this is going to be embarrassing. He said maybe. Me father said you don't have to do this. He said I know. Me sister-in-law looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Me brother was still on his phone by the entrance. Waiter came back, was smiling. He said thank you miss, your payment went through. Would you like the receipt? He said yes please. He handed me the slip. I signed it. I added a 20% tip. $3740 total, $22,440. He handed it back. Waiter said thank you, have a wonderful evening. Then he left. My mother's mouth was open. My father was staring at the receipt in the waiter's hand. My sister-in-law said, "How did you?" I said, "How did I?" What? She said, "Pay for that." I said, "I used my card." She said, "But that's almost $23,000. I said 18,700 plus tips. She said, "You just paid that like it was nothing." I said, "It was something, just not something I can't afford." My brother came back to the table. He said, "Okay, I sorted it out with the bank. They said there was a hold on my account. They're fixing it. I can pay now." I said, "Don't worry about it." He said, "What?" I said, "I already paid." He looked at the empty check holder. He said, "You paid?" I said, "Yes." He said, "How much was it again?" I said, 18,700. He said, "Then you just paid that?" I said, "Yes." He sat down slowly. He said, "With what money?" I said, "Mine." He said, "You don't have that kind of money." I said, "Clearly I do." My mother said, "This doesn't make sense." I said, "What doesn't make sense?" She said, "You're broke." I smiled. I said, "No, you said I was broke." I never said that. My father said, "What do you do for a living?" I said, "I'm a software engineer." "You know that?" He said, "Yes, but what else?" I said, "I built something." He said, "Built what?" I said, "An app, a business." He said, "When?" I said, 3 years ago." My mother said, "And you never told us." I said, "You never asked." My brother said, "How much do you make?" I said, "Enough." He said, "Ballpark?" I said, "More than I need." He said, "I want a number." I looked at him. I said, "Why?" He said, "Because I just got embarrassed in front of everyone and you swooped in like some hero. I want to know how." I said, "I worked, I saved, I invested, I built something people wanted." He said, "Doing what?" I said, "Solving problems, something you'd understand if you ever asked about my work." My mother said, "Don't talk to your brother like that." I said, "Why not? He talks to me however he wants." She said, "That's different." I said, "How?" She didn't answer. I said, "For years you've called me broke, you've made jokes, you've compared me to him, you've made me feel small, and I never said anything. I just let you think what you wanted to think." My father said, "We didn't mean anything by it." I said, "Yes, you did. You meant every word. You thought I was failing. You thought I was settling. You thought I wasn't good enough." He said, "That's not true." I said, "Then why did she call me broke tonight in front of everyone?" He said, "It was a joke." I said, "Jokes are supposed to be funny." My brother said, "So what? You have money, good for you. That doesn't change anything." I said, "You're right. It doesn't change that you've treated me like I was less than you for 10 years. It doesn't change that mom and dad worship everything you do and ignore everything I do. It doesn't change that I just bailed you out of the most embarrassing moment of your life." His face went red. He said, "I didn't ask you to do that." I said, "No, but you needed me to." He said, "I would have figured it out." I said, "How?" "Your cards were declined, both of them. You were about to call dad's credit card or maybe ask your wife's parents." He said, "Shut up." I said, "The truth hurts, doesn't it?" My sister-in-law said, "I think we should go." My brother said, "Yeah, let's get out of here." I said, "You're welcome." By the way, he stopped. He turned around. He said, "For what?" I said, "For saving you from having to wash dishes." He said, "Screw you." Then he walked out. His wife followed. She looked back at me once. I couldn't read her expression. My parents stayed sitting. My mother said, "I don't understand." I said, "What's not to understand?" She said, "Why didn't you tell us?" I said, "Would it have mattered?" She said, "Of course." I said, "Really? Because I told you I was doing fine. I told you work was good. You just decided fine meant broke. You decided good meant barely surviving. You made up your mind about who I was and you never questioned it." My father said, "We're proud of you." I said, "Now you are." He said, "We always were." I said, "No, you were proud of him. The son with the fancy car and the penthouse. I was just a daughter who didn't try hard enough." He said, "That's not fair." I said, "Neither is being called broke at dinner." I stood up. I said, "I'm leaving." My mother said, "Wait." I said, "For what?" She said, "We should talk about this." I said, "We just did." She said, "I mean really talk." I said, "There's nothing to say. You saw me one way, now you see me differently. That's it." She said, "It's not that simple." I said, "Yes it is." I walked toward the exit. My father called after me. He said, "Let us pay you back." I stopped. I turned around. I said, with what? He said, "We'll figure it out." I said, "Don't bother." He said, "It's too much money." I said, "It's nothing." He said, "It's not nothing." I said, "To you it's not, to me it is. And that's the point. The thing you called me broke for, the thing you made fun of, I have more of it than you ever imagined, and I did it quietly while you were too busy praising him to notice." I left. I walked to my car. My phone started ringing before I even got there. My mother. I didn't answer. Then my father. I didn't answer. Then my brother. I definitely didn't answer. I drove home in silence. The next morning I had 12 missed calls, 8 text messages. My mother wanted to have lunch. My father wanted to talk. My brother sent one message. It said, "We need to discuss what happened." I deleted it. 3 days later, my mother showed up at my apartment. I buzzed her and she came upstairs. She looked tired. She said, "You haven't been answering." I said, "I know." She said, "Why?" I said, "Because I don't want to talk, she said. We're family. I said, family doesn't treat each other the way you treated me. She sat on my couch. She said, I'm sorry. I said, for what specifically? She said, for calling you broke. I said, and she said, and for not taking you seriously. I said, and she said, and for comparing you to your brother. I said, thank you. She said, is that it? I said, what else do you want? She said, I want you to forgive me. I sat across from her. I said, I'll think about it. She said, that's not good enough. I said, it's all I have right now. She said, your brother feels terrible. I said, good. She said, his cards were declined because he's been overspending. He's in debt, a lot of debt. I said, I know. She said, how? I said, because people who need to prove they have money usually don't have as much as they claim. She said, he wants to apologize. I said, then he can call me himself. She said, he's embarrassed. I said, he should be. She said, you humiliated him. I said, no, I saved him. There's a difference. She said, it doesn't feel that way to him. I said, that's not my problem. My mother stood up. She said, I don't know who you are anymore. I said, I'm the same person I've always been. You just finally see me. She said, you've changed. I said, no, your perception changed. I've been successful for years. You were just too busy looking at him to notice me. She said, that's cruel. I said, it's honest. She left. I didn't hear from her for 2 weeks and my father called. He said, your brother filed for bankruptcy. I said, okay. He said, okay, that's all you have to say. I said, what do you want me to say? He said, he's your brother. I said, and I paid his dinner bill. We're even. My father said he lost everything, the penthouse, the car, everything. I said, that's what happens when you spend more than you make. He said, can you help him? I said, no. He said, why not? I said, because he needs to learn. He said, learn what? I said, that being successful isn't about looking successful. It's about actually being successful. My father said, you're being heartless. I said, I'm being realistic. He said, he's family. I said, so am I. And for years, nobody cared about my success because it wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, it wasn't Instagram worthy. Now he's lost everything and you want me to save him? The answer is no. 6 months later, things changed. My brother moved back in with my parents. He got a regular job. He started over. He didn't call me. I didn't call him. My parents invited me to Thanksgiving. I went. My brother was there. We were polite, distant. He didn't mention the dinner, neither did I. My mother tried to brag about me to relatives. She said, my daughter is very successful. She built a business. I said, Mom, don't. She said, what? I said, I don't need you to brag about me now. She looked hurt. She said, I'm proud of you. I said, you weren't before. She said, people change. I said, I didn't. You did. My brother and I eventually talked. He said, I'm sorry. I said, for what? He said, for being an arrogant idiot. I said, okay. He said, that's it. I said, what do you want? He said, I want us to be okay. I said, we are just different than before. He said, I respected you after that dinner. I said, you should have respected me before. I still see my family holidays. Mostly they treat me differently. Now they ask about work. They listen when I talk. They don't make jokes about money. My mother doesn't call me broke. My brother doesn't brag. My father actually asks questions, but the respect came too late. I can't forget the years of being invisible, the years of being compared, the years of being treated like I wasn't enough. The $18,700 dinner didn't change who I was. It just changed how they saw me. And that's the part that still hurts. I had to spend that much money for them to finally look at me differently. I had to prove myself in the most public way possible. I couldn't just be respected for being me. People ask if I regret paying that bill. I don't, but I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my family needed a grand gesture to see my worth. If you were in my place, would you have done the same?